Yeah, and after Syracuse, you get picked by the Miami Dolphins, 8th overall in the draft, and you go down there. George Wilson's there for a couple years, who you lay out in the book. Very player friendly coach. Very not nice. It's just a very player friendly coach. Then in comes Don Shula, and it sounded like when he first got there, he ruffled a lot of feathers with how he sort of ran the team. But looking at sort of Schwartzwalter and Shula, are they kind of cut from the same cloth in that very hard-nosed way of sort of running a team? Because I get the vibe that those two guys would probably be much in line in how they ran a football team.
I think their opinion of how you should advance the football is a little different.
Okay.
Still leaning much more towards the pass. Schwartzwalder is from the older era where, in the only time you throw a ball, only three things can happen, and two of them are bad, is the way he looked at it. But Shula, on the other hand, was much more, he's much more prone towards the pass. Johnny Unitas, look at the people he had and look what he did. He went to the Super Bowl. Of course, he lost it, but at the same time, he got there. And, he was pretty famous for having that. When he came, there was a strong change of atmosphere. He was like Schwartzwalder, was very discipline oriented, very serious about practice. The worst thing you could do on a Shula team was go through the motions. If he thought you were going through the motions, just gliding through practice and not taking it seriously, he was in your face like the north wind in Alaska. I mean, he was right there. And he did not, would not let you do that. He was very serious about the fundamentals and how I did it. When he first got there, he started all of that in a heavy discipline hand. And I figured my days are numbered. So I just went in. He made the statement. He told us, if you had something to say, you address me as coach in front of the rest of the team. There's a certain military lightness here in discipline. We will, this is the way I'm addressed in front of the team. When you come in my office and shut the door, it's man to man. There's no coach, there's no player. We talk man to man. He said, you can say anything you want to say. He says, I'll hold you responsible for it, but it's just you and I in there. It's not going to insult me. I'm not going to, we'll talk that way. So I listened to that for about 3 or 4 days, and I thought, well, I need to go in there because I don't see myself fitting in on a Shula coach team. So I walked in and he said, when I shut the door, he said, well, what do you think? I said, I think that I don't like you very much. He said, well, that's good. We have something in common because I don't particularly like you either. You couldn't ask for any more honest situation than that. And
that's a common ground.
I'm fit in, and he said, well, I wouldn't come to that conclusion. And I told him why. I thought maybe he was more prone to the pass. He said, well, I probably am, but I've assembled a staff here. He mentioned Monty Clark and some of the coaching staff that he had assembled. And he said, perhaps this coaching staff will be more receptive to that. And I said, well, I'm figured I was going to be traded. He said, I looked into that. He said, I can't get anything for you. So we reduced all the talk right down to the facts in a hurry, which was his style. And I walked out of there realizing that it was day to day. I understood, but at least there was a plan to take a look at perhaps establishing some kind of running game or ball control offense, which was keynote to Monty Clark being there, the offensive line coach who had been a great player at Cleveland and blocked for Jimmy Brown in some of the games that I snuck into and got to see. So that there was a basis there, and there was a recognition of coach-player relationship that started to make some sense. There was no hostility necessarily, but there was truth. When you walked in there and you put your cards on the table, he put his cards on the table, and you advanced that way. And I think the only thing, and I mentioned this the second time because it's a very big point with him, as long as you took your job seriously as the coaches took their job, because they were putting in a lot of time. Their midnight hours was not unheard of there. And no detail was too small. I mean, Coach Shula, to emphasize that point, before we played the Redskins in Super Bowl VII, he flew out to L.A., sat in the Coliseum 1 week before the game, on that Sunday before the game, week before, and charted where the sun was every hour and decided what plays could be called. You know, think about that. That's how detail oriented he was. And to be that caring and then have somebody going through the motions, you can see that wouldn't work. So we had to be as intense, perhaps not as intense as he and the coaches were, but you had to be pretty close. His worst sin, as far as he was considered, was going through the motions and not paying attention, because that sets yourself up for the big mistake.